The Ducks preseason is over, and now we've got to wait another, 4 or 5 days for the regular season to start for the Ducks? What's up with that? Well, I'll talk about some takeaways from this preseason and more on this episode of Locked On Anaheim Ducks.
You're Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Anaheim Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Here we go, guys. Welcome to Locked On Anaheim Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jason Hernandez. I've been covering hockey for over a decade, and this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. So once again, I've been covering hockey for over a decade, and also currently the public address voice for the Coachella Valley Firebirds, among other things. You can catch me online. You can catch me doing public address for college sports, among other things. So yeah, just check me out on Twitter at StimpyJD. And let's talk about the preseason. It is now over. It actually ended over the weekend. The NHL preseason was technically supposed to end on Monday, as I'm recording this, but that final preseason game was canceled because of Hurricane Milton. So that means the preseason actually ended over the weekend, and one of those games during the preseason was that final game, the final litmus test against the San Jose Sharks. So I'm not actually going to talk about that particular game at all. I want to focus on a couple of big takeaways from the entirety of this postseason. And I think my biggest takeaway from this not postseason. I'm getting ahead of myself by a year or two. Training camp thoughts. Cutter Gauthier looks good. I think he's going to really make a splash in this league. I said it before, and I'm going to stick with this, and I'm going to make this one of my predictions. I'll do a prediction show later this week. But I legit think that Cutter Gauthier is going to be a Calder Trophy finalist this season, along with Macklin Celebrini. One of those two guys, I think, is very likely to win the Calder Trophy this season. Gauthier, of course, played only one game last season, but he is officially going to be a rookie this season. Cutter Gauthier, for my money, I think was one of the best players for the Ducks during this preseason. By the way, he led the team in shots with 18. As a matter of fact, he led the entire league in the preseason with 18 shots. Yeah, that says a lot. He's definitely shoot first. How long has it been since the Ducks very legitimately had someone with such a shoot first mentality? It's been years, literal years. Definitely the first time since I've been covering the Ducks on Locked On Anaheim Ducks. First time in at least 6-7 years that the Ducks had someone as trigger happy as Cutter Gauthier. And the fact that, I take that back, he was tied for second in the NHL with 18 shots in the preseason. So second in the NHL, not first, but still 18 shots is a heck of a lot of shots. He did score on 2 of those shots. And talking with a couple of colleagues, I am inclined to believe that that's nothing but a good thing, because certain names were thrown around. Corey Perry's name was thrown around as someone that was shoot first, someone that had the capability for double-digit shots. And yeah, you look at the shooting percentage, 2 for 18, that's 11%. But, as a good friend of mine said, eventually those pucks are going to get across the line. Eventually those pucks are going to cross the net. We saw that twice. It is better to have someone get 18 shots on goal. And he also asked me, well, how many missed shots did he have? I'm glad you asked. So he actually missed less than 10 shots during the preseason. He had, I think it was by final tally, I think it was 28 shot attempts. So 18 shots on goal, 10 of them were either missed or blocked. That's it. That's not bad. That's about a little bit above average. because there are certainly some players out there that cannot hit the net worth a darn. They can't hit the broadside of a barn. And I've seen this from Ducks players where they just miss and miss and miss, and they miss and get blocked shots way more often than they get shots on net. So 18 on goal, 10 missing or blocked. That's a good percentage. I will take that any day. And I even go back to the dozen shots against the Sharks up at the Shark Tank. And thanks to Shang Peng for checking on that one. He only missed 5 shots that game. That's it. And I think that game was, and other games this preseason, is a testament to how aggressive he is. That's something that the Ducks have been sorely missing. So I'm going to stick with my prediction on Cutter Gauthier this season. He's by far my biggest takeaway. Could he move up to the third line, second line this season? Heck yes. In fact, looking at some of the lines just in general, Cutter Gauthier was a top 6 during that last preseason game. I mean, would it be a bad thing if we had Cutter Gauthier in the second line? I don't think so. Let's show some aggression. Why not? Would it be a bad thing to have Leo Carlsson and Cutter Gauthier on the second line? Abso-friggin-lutely not. I would love to see that. Where does that leave the others? Well, everyone else is going to be jockeying for a spot. But looking at that left side and center, you have Gauthier, Leo Carlsson, McTavish, Ryan Strome, Trevor Zegras, Frank Vetrano. Your left wing center is set. And those are 3 lines. For the first time in years, the Ducks actually look like they can be 3 solid lines deep. I harken back to 3-4 years ago when the Ducks had a good top line, they had a good second line, and then it falls off. And you wind up with a bunch of players that some of you have never heard of. And going back to the last week of last season, you had a few guys that you knew were not going to make the roster this season, but they still somehow wound up in the starting lineup for the Ducks in a second or third line. I mean, need I remind you of some of those lineups last season? I'm not going to go there. But this season, barring injuries, this could be some ultimate top 9 depth for the Ducks. And that's going to help them tremendously. This feels like the start. It's a culmination of good things to come. So I'm going to remain optimistic. I'm going to remain hopeful for this season with those lines. I think the Ducks, I'm not going to say unstoppable, but I think they're going to be very much improved. And I'm going to stick with the 18 to 20 points improvement. I'm going to stick with that. With that being said, my other big takeaway actually had to do with the lineups, as I just mentioned. They're deep. They're deeper than they've been in a while. They're still not as deep as some of the premier teams in the league, but on the right wing, you have Alex Killorn, Robbie Fabry. Troy Terry's a right winger. Troy Terry is probably your best right winger right now. I didn't mention him before. And then you have Killorn and Fabry. So your top 9, Cutter, Leo, Troy Terry, Zegras, McTavish, Killorn, Frankie, Strome, Fabry. That's pretty good. Your fourth line is Brock McGinn, Isaac Lundestrom, and Brett Leeson. And I like Brett Leeson's game a whole lot. I was very happy to see that lineup take the ice against San Jose, the final preseason game over the weekend. That was cool. And the defense, by the way, the defense looks really good. And I'll actually talk about the defense more on the second part of this podcast. But overall, the scoring is going to be much, much more improved. So along with Cutter Gauthier, just the better depth for the forwards this season are my biggest takeaways from this preseason. All right, we're going to head to the first intermission, and I'm going to talk about defense. Defense on the other side. And now a brief word from FanDuel. And by the way, FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook, and you can start the season right with a big return on FanDuel for opening day of the NHL. So when you get in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. And by the way, you've got Seattle as a favorite in their opener. Florida, the defending champions, they're playing Boston. Florida's the favorites. And then you have Chicago at the Utah Hockey Club. No names for now. Utah's favored there. So you could check out all of those games and check out the latest odds on FanDuel.com. And you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com, the official sports betting partner of the Locked On Podcast Network. And please, folks, gamble responsibly. Welcome back to episode number 932 of Locked On Anaheim Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Once again, you're locked in with Jason Hernandez. Defense is going to be key for the Ducks this season, ... if they remain healthy. This was a big deal for the Ducks last season. It seemed like their defense was just decimated last season. Pavel Mintyukov was out for what seemed like an eternity. Jackson Lacombe missed some action. Radko Gudas missing some games. That hurt. I think one of the biggest losses last year was Tristan Luneau, who started off the season in Anaheim. And then after that, everything bad happened. Everything bad happened. Did it slow him down? Yeah, a little bit. It slowed him down a tad. And then you look at Olin Zellweger. Zellweger missed some time. And by the way, Zellweger didn't even play that last preseason game. He didn't. He was the 7th defenseman. That's my other takeaway in general. Who's going to be the odd man out? Is it going to be probably not Dumoulin. Is it going to be Luneau? Is it going to be Zellweger? Who is going to start on opening night over the weekend, which, by the way, is on the road for the Ducks? They don't start at home. They start on the road, and that's not even until Saturday night, so we've got to wait a while. In fact, the Ducks are going to be the last team. Actually, I'll get to that later because I'm still about it. But who's going to be the defenseman? Is it going to be... Well, okay, here's who we know is going to be in. Jackson Lacombe. I will say Lacombe has been pretty impressive this preseason. He even got some power play time. And I mentioned this with Emily Wilson on the previous podcast. We talked a little bit about defense, and we talked a little bit about which players impressed us a lot, not only on rookie camp, but during the preseason so far. And Lacombe was one of those guys that looked impressive. He was getting on that first power play unit. He was playing smarter. He was making more concerted passes. He was making a better effort to get the perfect pass. And by the way, the Ducks power play looked pretty solid this preseason. They were at a rate of, I want to say it was like 26 or 27%. That's a high power play percentage. I actually need to look this up right now because it was a pretty good percentage. Well, I take that back. 29.4%. That's a high rate for the power play. And they looked impressive. They looked impressive on that power play. And I think it starts with Jackson Lacombe, quarterback in the power play on defense. And he was also there with Cutter Gauthier, Troy Terry, Leo Carlson, Mason McTavish. That was your first power play unit, and they looked good. Yeah, there's a couple of names missing there. Trevor Zegras, Frank Vetrano, Pavel Mintyukov, they were on the other power play unit. That's a pretty good 1-2 punch, to be honest. And both of those units looked good during the preseason. So I think Lacombe is going to be one of those guys that's going to be an everyday person in the lineup. Cam Fowler, he's making the money. He's probably going to be an everyday player as well. Pavel Mintyukov. I still believe in Minty. I do. And I still think he is better than some of you. You know who you are. Make him out for. Then you have Radko Gudas, who of course is going to play every game because he's the captain. So he's going to be out there, but he looked better during the end of last season, and especially during the World Championships. He looked good out there. Then you have Brian Dumoulin. Okay, so what does that leave? That leaves Tristan Luneau on the right side. Okay, that leaves Olin Zellweger. You see where I'm going here. You see the issue here. And then you also have Vakanainen, who, for all intents and purposes, will be either a 7th or 8th defenseman. Will one of those guys wind up in San Diego to start the season? I don't know about that. And actually, this is going to be a second part of the podcast later today because as I'm recording this, the Ducks roster is going to come out. And I'm going to talk more about the Ducks roster. And I do this particular episode every year where it's Meet the Team. So the next episode is going to be a Meet the Team podcast. That's what's coming up soon. But who's going to be the starters? And how many players do the Ducks have on their roster? So more takeaways on that regard. I think one other big takeaway that I got to talk about is Lukas Dostal. He's ready, folks. He is ready. During the preseason, he was 2-1, goals against 2.25. So 2.25 goals against, and a save percentage of 9.25. Ooh, that's pretty good. It's better than Dostal's average numbers. Those are above average. He looked good. He looked very good in his 3 games in the preseason. I sincerely think that he's going to take the number 1 spot from John Gibson, who's going to be out for a while because he had an emergency appendectomy. He still could be out for another couple of weeks, it looks like. So when John Gibson comes back, that remains to be seen. They could bring him back slowly if Dostal has a good start to the season, and that's fine. As far as a backup is concerned, it is not going to be Calle Clang. It is not, because the Ducks legit just made a signing. So what's that all about? Well, you know what? I'll actually talk about that on the third part of this podcast. So coming up next after the break, I'm going to talk about the scheduling and the newest signing for the Anaheim Ducks. Stay locked in. And now a brief word from Indeed. And folks, if you haven't used Indeed and their instant match, then what are you doing? Because we're driven by the search for better. When it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all, but to match with Indeed with their instant match, which is one of the best things about Indeed. You just put up your job listing, and you know what? Instant matches come up quickly, and they have a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. And join the more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. And listeners of this very show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/lockedon. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this very podcast. Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. Welcome back to episode number 933 of Locked On Anaheim Ducks. I promise I can count. I promise. Once again, you're locked in with very tired Jason Hernandez, who can count up to 933, not 932, but that's neither here nor there. Let's talk about the latest signing that the Ducks just made. They pretty much got an insurance policy out of this one, because waivers went out on Monday and the Sabres lost one of their goalies. The Anaheim Ducks claimed veteran goaltender James Reimer off of waivers. Yeah, this is not a bad deal for the Ducks. This is an insurance policy. This probably indicates that John Gibson is not going to come back this week. He might not come back next week. And this also indicates that Lukas Dostal is probably not going to start every single game. I mean, I expect Reimer to get one, maybe two starts. Dostal should still get the majority of the starts for October or whenever John Gibson comes back. But having James Reimer as a backup gives the Ducks a little bit of peace of mind. And this also might indicate that maybe Calle Clang isn't quite ready to back up in the NHL yet. I mean, Clang, I'm going to be honest, he struggled at times last season in San Diego. Clang wasn't even supposed to be starting in San Diego. He was supposed to be the backup goaltender to Tomas Suchanek this season. And Clang did struggle a little bit during this preseason. So I think the Ducks actually watching that and the Ducks kind of figuring that out. He did struggle a little bit also during the rookie showcase or the rookie face-off in El Segundo. Not to say he looked bad. He didn't look bad by any stretch, but I think there is better out there, and Calle Clang still has a little bit to learn, and he's got a little bit of growing to do as far as becoming a professional goaltender. So this is a smart move for the Ducks. The Ducks could always waive James Reimer later on this season, or, I mean, they're going to have to send him down anyway. Once Gibby comes back, they're going to have to pass him through waivers anyway in order for him to possibly go down to San Diego and be an insurance policy down there. This has happened in the recent past. I'm actually going to go back. You know what this kind of reminds me of a little bit? Maybe not exactly, but at least in the short term. Remember when Ryan Miller was the backup goaltender for the Anaheim Ducks and brought that veteran presence to a team that needed it? And Miller wound up being the Ducks backup for a while. Not that I'm saying this is exactly going to happen, but wouldn't it be kind of neat if he backed up a little bit and gave some peace of mind in San Diego? That's where things can be a little bit spicy. That's where things can change a little bit for the goals. As I mentioned, it's not going to be Butaitz. It's going to be a combination of Calle Clang and hopefully James Reimer. That would be a pretty cool pair of goalies. I would be all about that. So I think that's where the Ducks are as far as goaltending. Just get a short-term insurance policy and see what happens. If he passes through waivers again, he goes to San Diego. That's fine. And if someone claims him, you know what? The Ducks got a little bit of time with Reimer. That's fine too. So once again, Ducks claiming him off of waivers from Buffalo, who, by the way, are now 0-2 to begin the season. They lost both their games to the New Jersey Devils in those games that took place in Europe. So technically, the NHL season has already started, although most people are saying today's opening day is the official opening day of hockey. Whoop-de-doo. Okay, I get that. That's where we're at. Every other team plays a game before the Ducks. There's 3 games tonight, as this is going to come out now on a Tuesday. There's 3 games today. Blues, Kraken, Bruins, Panthers, Chicago, Utah. 3 games opening night, all on ESPN. Then you've got a slew of games on Wednesday, a bunch of games on Thursday. In fact, there is 9 games on Thursday. That's most of the teams, and a bunch on Wednesday. And there's still a bunch of games on Friday as well. The Ducks don't play until the very last game Saturday night. And by then, every other team will have played by then. What's up with that? I mean, yes, every other Locked On podcast on the hockey side is going to have actual freaking hockey to talk about this week. Nope, not the Ducks. Gotta wait till next week before I can start talking about actual freaking hockey. because the hockey schedulers decided, you know what, the Ducks aren't important enough to play opening night or any one of these national games. No, the Ducks kind of got screwed over there too. Not many national games, even though they are one of the more exciting young teams in the league. But this is just me venting at this point, since I won't be able to watch the game on Saturday. Fine, whatever. But hey, we got next week to look forward to. And here's what else we have to look forward to for the remainder of this week. So the roster is going to come out. As this comes out, the roster might already be out. So we'll have a roster show. In other words, my annual Meet the Ducks. So that'll be a podcast later tonight. That'll be fresh. And then later on this week, I'm actually going to talk about my hopes and predictions. I do a podcast like that every season too. A preview of the season, what I'm hoping for, and my official predictions for this coming season. So that'll also be later on this week. In the meantime, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. I'm just going to end it quickly. This podcast is free and available across all platforms, including Stitcher, Spotify, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast. You can follow me on Twitter X at StimpyJD. The show's Twitter X is at LO_Ducks. Oh yeah, later this week. How can I forget? Mailbag episode. Mailbag episode will probably be either Thursday or Friday. Probably Friday. So or either an early Saturday. I might record it at Acrisure. Maybe I'll do that. So I'll just go ahead and say mailbag episode coming up Friday or Saturday. In the meantime, thanks for your support. Really appreciate it. For Locked On Anaheim Ducks, I'm Jason Hernandez saying have a great rest of the day. Please remember to be safe out there. Please be kind to one another, and the Ducks fly together.